Hi, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll try my possible best to simplify solar system so it's easier for you to understand and also to be able to make decisions on the kind of system you would need for your project, either your house, your office, and so on. In recent times in Ghana, there's been a lot of power outages, and the sad part about it is that there isn't any form of pattern as to how these outages are done, and people have been requesting for timetables from the power generators as well as distributors, and it looks like there isn't going to be any time soon. So I have had a lot of people contact me to find out if they could get sort of like a solar system for their homes especially. And sometimes you hear someone say, I have a 3-bedroom house, how much will it cost me to have a solar system? Someone will say I have a 2-bedroom, someone will say I have a 4-bedroom. So in today's video, I'll try to explain a couple of things that goes into solar systems, so it is easier for you to even be able to come up with what solution is suitable for especially your home or maybe offices and so on. So let's just delve into it. So when we talk about solar systems, I'm sure you might want to understand what exactly is it, how does it work, and the rest. And I know you might have heard that it has something to do with the sun and so on. So let me just try and explain briefly a little bit about that. So a solar system is basically taking energy from the sun. The sun produces heat as well as it also gives us light. So the solar is taking the light aspect of it and then converting that energy into electricity. So that's basically what a solar system does. It takes the daylight from the sun during the day and then converts that into electricity. And someone may ask, what if it's rainy days and the sun is not up? So as I said, it takes daylight. So then it doesn't necessarily need the sun to function. But once the sun is up, the sun produces a lot of light. It makes everywhere brighter. But if the sun is not present and there's still daylight, you could see and the rest, it takes a bit of that daylight energy, which is still produced by the sun anyway, and then converts that into electricity. And then that electricity is used to power a lot of things. So for your homes, you could use that to power your air conditioners, your fridge, your TVs, and so on. So that is just like a brief summary of what a solar system does. Now, talking about this, it brings us to a very important aspect of the solar system, which has to do with what comprises the entire system. So for a solar system, there are a couple of different things coming into play to make up the entire system. An example of some of these things has to do with the solar panels, which you might have heard of, or PV or photovoltaic system. So either solar panels or PV or photovoltaic system is the same thing. And then aside from that, you also have the inverter, and then you also have maybe batteries and so on. So what the PV or the solar panels does is that it takes the energy, as I said earlier, the daylight or sunlight energy from the sun, and then it converts that into electricity. So the PV is basically generating electricity. That is all it does. It generates electricity. Now this electricity can be used in different ways. So you can have a system where you only have the PV connected to whatever. So there are systems like water pumps, and it's powered by solar. It doesn't need any inverter, it doesn't need any battery. Once the sunlight or the daylight is up, it takes that energy, it converts it into electricity and uses it to power the pump. So you can have a system without the inverter as well as without the battery. Now, so that is just a summary of what a solar panels actually does. It takes light energy, it converts that into electricity. And then you come to the inverter. So the inverter is sort of like a brain of an entire solar system, where it is able to decide what to do with whatever energy is being produced by the sun. So that is what the inverter does. Now, one thing I have to say is that the energy produced by the panels is known as DC, which is direct current. Now, direct current, there are devices that are powered with direct current. Now, most of our appliances we use in our homes are AC, which are alternate current. So the inverter converts the energy from DC into AC. So we are able to use that in our homes to power our devices and so on. So just as I was saying, there are devices that are DC powered and there are devices that are AC powered. And majority of devices AC powered, especially appliances, are more than that of DC powered. So the inverter is basically sort of the brain. It takes DC, converts it into AC, and then it powers the house. So that is what the inverter component of the solar system does. And then there's the battery. So the battery is just for storage, just as you have batteries in your phones, in your car. Yes, so the battery is to store power. So the panels generate electricity. The inverter changes that to AC to supply the house, but keeps it still in DC to save it in the battery. So the battery is also direct current, so it doesn't also use AC, rather DC. So the inverter does that, all that. Now, for a complete solar system, aside the panels, aside the inverter and the battery, there's also something known as charge controller. The charge controller is basically to determine to what point should it charge the batteries to for it stop, and so on with that. So in recent times, the kind of inverters that we have very intelligent inverters which does that as well. So it has inbuilt charge controllers. So it doesn't necessarily need, you don't necessarily need a different component or charge controller to be able to do that, but you can have that done in the inverter itself. I hope with this little summary I'm trying to do doesn't confuse you more. So for a solar system, you have the solar panels, taking or making good use of the light produced by the sun, converting that into electricity, which is in a form of direct current, and then coming to the inverter, which converts that to alternate current and then supplies your home. And then some of those power is also stored in the battery, also as direct current. And then when you have the battery power in the house, it's the inverter is taking the direct current from the battery and then also changing that into alternate current, which is AC. So then from this explanation, you could tell that you can have the panels powering your house directly without necessarily using the battery. Yes, so that is also an aspect of solar system. So recently we went to set up a solar system for someone, and I was telling her that with a system in place, she's actually going to be able to reduce what consumption she does with electricity, because she has the grid. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but she has ECG, or she's on the grid, and then she also has the solar system 7 as sort of like a backup. However, the way the system is designed is in such a way that if during the daytime like this, the sun is up producing a lot of daylight energy, the panels is able to supply that energy to the house. So then she doesn't necessarily have to be using the grid. And with this, you don't have to be going to change. No, it's a system that is set up. So the inverter is basically doing all that. So during the daytime like this, you have the power generated by the panels supplying the house. And that means that you're going to be reducing your bill cost at the end of the month. So at the only points that you'll be using the grid is when the sun is probably going down, it's getting to night time, and the sun or the PV is not generating enough power. Then the ECG takes care of that based on how the system is designed. I hope you get it. So solar system is actually a good thing. I personally have been using solar systems for over 2 years now, and it's really been worth it. Our new house has been using solar system since December, and it's served us so well. Most of the time where we live, because we live on a hill, and when there's power outages around the communities nearby, we still have light. So that's one of the good things about solar system. So let me look at what next I have to talk about regarding solar system. So now let me try and talk a little bit about each component, the PV, the inverter, and then the battery, even though I've done a brief description about what they are and what they do. Now, when it comes to the PVs, there are different types of PVs, or the solar panels. So there's the monocrystalline, there's polycrystalline, and even in recent times, there's solar tiles and all that. But those ones haven't really become so much popular. So we'll limit this video to the that is the monocrystalline as well as the polycrystalline. Now, the monocrystalline turns out to be more effective and efficient than that of the poly, and this has to do with the way they are designed. So I won't talk so much about that because it's a bit technical and the rest, but that is one thing you need to know. So when you compare the prices of poly crystalline to monocrystalline, a 550 watt panel for both, that of mono is going to be a little bit expensive than that of the poly. So that's one thing you need to know. So in case you're having your system designed, there's the option for the poly, there's also the option for the mono. So in case you're looking at cost, maybe you could be looking at some of these things as well. Now, aside from that, I believe you heard me mention 550 watts. So then the energy that is generated is measured in watts. So if you're going to be buying solar panels, usually they'll ask you what wattage or what watt are you looking out for. So there's like 100 watts, there's 20 watts, there's 50 watts, there's 200 watts, there's 500 watts, there's 400 watts, and so on. So the higher the wattage of it, it means that the higher electricity it's able to generate at a very short time. Now, also talking about the higher the wattage it is, you're also looking at the size of the panel. So a 100 watt panel is going to be small in size. However, that of 400 watts, 460 watts is going to be bigger. 550 watts is going to be bigger than that of 400 watts. So that is one thing you also need to know. If you're going higher in terms of the wattage, you're also looking at something bigger. Yes, very, very necessary. And I'm mentioning this so that in case you're looking at having a solar system, especially the panels mounted on your roof, then you take into consideration the size of your roof to determine what size of panels you should be going in for, so that at the end of the day, you're able to have a system designed to be able to suit not just your electrical needs, but also the design of your roof as well. Now, aside from the PV, which we have mono and poly, the inverter also, we have different kinds of inverters that does different things. So there's grid-tied inverter, there's standalone inverter, there's a hybrid inverter, there's on-grid inverter, there's off-grid, and so on. Yes, there are different kinds of inverters. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the hybrid type, and I would suggest, depending on where you are, it's one of the best inverters to have. Now, the hybrid inverter is one of the intelligent inverters that is available on the market, and this is because it is able to work with your existing electricity. So if you have the grid power in your house and you have a hybrid inverter, it has a section for AC input. So AC input means that your on-grid power, it is able to take that and it uses that energy to be able to power the house directly, as well as to be able to charge your batteries. So in the absence of the solar panels, the power from your grid is able to do that, to charge the batteries as well. So with the hybrid inverters, like I was saying, it has inbuilt the charge controllers. And the charge controller is also rated in amps. I don't want to be a bit technical with this video, so I won't talk so much about that, but it has inbuilt charge controllers. And aside from that, some has Wi-Fi capabilities, some has like so many other features as part of it. So ideally, when you have a hybrid inverter set up, designed properly, and the rest, what happens is that when you have PV present, you have a battery present, you have the grid present, and based on the configuration that you do, during the daytime like this, it could decide to use the power from the sun to power whatever devices you are using, depending on the power you are generating with the sun. And when that power is not sufficient, then it can be using the grid to supplement that, maybe that deficiency it experiences. So you could have the panels and then the grid working at the same time to be able to power whatever devices you are using in the house, especially during the daytime. So then, like I said, that will reduce whatever amount you be paying for electricity. So if you're paying about 1,000 cedis a month, depending on the size of your house and the things you use, then you should be looking at paying about between 600 to about 800 cedis because of the presence of the panels, which is also helping produce electricity. So that helps you minimize bills. Now, the hybrid inverter is designed in such a way that, like I was saying, it takes the grid, it has the PV, it has a battery. So in a situation where there's a power outage, it switches itself automatically. And this is basically how the system is designed. The system can be designed in such a way that when there's a power outage, you won't notice it. It will automatically switch from the grid to whatever is present. So if it's daytime, it'll switch to the panels or the PV. If it's nighttime, it'll automatically switch to the battery. So, and it doesn't blink or the power doesn't go off. It does this in real time. An example, maybe if you look at standby genset or standby plants, some of them, there's a delay, some sort of delays. You notice that the light will go off before it comes on. But with this hybrid inverters, it doesn't do that. Well, it will depend on the type you have anyway, but the ones that I've used so far, it doesn't do that. As soon as the grid goes off, it automatically switches to whatever is based on your settings. So you can make the panels your first priority, the grid your second priority, the battery your last priority. So based on that configuration, it automatically switches that in real time and you won't even notice it. So that's one good thing about the hybrid inverters. So if you are at a place where you have access to your grid and you want to have a solar system, maybe you should be looking at the hybrid type of inverters. That is one type of inverter available in the market, and it's very, very effective. And being effective will also have to depend with the brand that you are choosing. There are so many brands when it comes to solar systems. I won't be able to recommend any specific type of brand in this video, but whichever brand you come by, try as much as possible to read a little bit about it, learn about it before you decide to go into it. Talking about inverters, now let's talk a bit about the batteries as well. So battery is basically storage, and it only comes up whenever it is needed or whenever the PV or grid is not available. Now with the batteries also, there are so many different types of batteries available in the market. I'll be able to give some few examples. There's gel batteries, there's lead acid batteries, there's lithium ion batteries as well, and so on. Among all these type of batteries, they all work in different ways, but their whole aim is to be able to store power or energy and then distribute that energy whenever it is needed. So I'll talk a little bit about maybe gel batteries as well as lithium ion batteries. Now gel batteries or maybe gel batteries and lead acid batteries as well as lithium ion batteries. Gel batteries or lead acid batteries look similar to that of car batteries. So if you look at car batteries, the way they come, basically that's how some of these lead acid and lithium gel batteries come in, and they have the way they work. I won't talk so much about how they work, but they basically store power, and that is just all. So they store power and then discharges their power as well as have their power charge, and that is just about it. And then there's also the lithium-ion battery, which will be my main focus for this video. Now the lithium-ion battery happens to be the most effective as well as efficient batteries available on the market, especially when it comes to solar system. And I'm beginning to hear that there's going to be, I think, phosphate battery, something like that. I haven't really seen much about that, but I'm hearing that there's going to be other forms of battery which is going to be even more effective than the lithium battery. So for now, we'll limit our conversation or this video to lithium batteries. So lithium batteries is one of the most effective ones on the market, and because it is very effective, its price is also high. So a section of this video I'll come to prices, so you also understand what the pricing looks like when it comes to deciding on a solar system to use. And the reason why lithium-ion battery is expensive has to do with its chemistry, how it stores power and also discharges power, as against that of gel batteries or lead acid battery. So it does that very efficiently. So then it's able to also last for a very long time based on how it is designed. So you're looking at gel batteries lasting between 3 to maximum of 5 years. Sometimes it could go a little bit over based on how it is used. And then you have lithium batteries lasting between 15, 20, sometimes a little bit more, also based on how it is used. When I say how it is used, it has to do with how it charges and discharges. Yeah, so it has cycles, like a maximum cycles on the total amount of charges you can have, as well as total amount of discharges you can have, so that, so if you're using it so much, it might probably not get up to that point, but basically that is the duration you're looking at when it comes to lithium batteries. Now, there are also different kinds of lithium batteries available. There are some that has inbuilt something that is known as BMS, which is basically battery management system. Now, and there are some without BMS. So there are some that is just the battery there. It has the power and everything done to it. You buy it, you connect, and you're good to go. But there are some that also even require some few configurations to it and the rest, which has to do with the BMS ones. That is the battery management ones. Now, the ones with the battery management are best to have as against the ones without. The reason is because those with the BMS features has sort of like an intelligent system on its own, which decides how it charges as well as discharges to be able to prevent any issues from happening to the system. So there are things that could go wrong with the solar systems. I'll talk about that in the later part of this video. But the lithium batteries, the BMS ones, or the ones with BMS, has the capability to be able to decide how it charges the battery as well as discharges it, so that everything is done in a safe way so you don't end up having issues with the battery. An example is the specific type I use. When the battery charges up to 90%, it cuts power. It doesn't charge up to 100%, it charges up to 99%. It cuts power, it prevents it from charging anymore, and it allows it to discharge all the way through to 90% before it starts charging again. So in this case, you will never have a situation of overcharging or even undercharging because of how the system is designed. You get it. So that is where the BMS aspect. Now, talking about these two types of lithium ion batteries, those with the BMS capability of functions are more expensive than that without the BMS. So that's one thing you need to know, because I was looking at a system we designed for one client recently. She was showing me some pictures of what her neighbors had got, and I was trying to explain some of these things to her. And I was talking about the system that we had designed, so I'll show you photos of that. And she was very much impressed and happy about what we had brought to her. And she was actually going to show it to that of her neighbors to see that this is what she has, and it looks like it's one of the best. Yes. So when you're deciding to go to have solar system done, you need to understand some of these few things to be able to ask the right questions. Else, if not, you might have a system designed for you, but it will not be living up to expectation, and then these systems are expensive. So if you're having a system, you spend so much money on it and it's not doing what exactly it has to do, that is not going to really help. So aside the BMS features of the battery, that's the lithium battery, there's also the number of cells that is contained in the battery. So if you look at lithium battery, they come in different sizes, and this sizes has to do with the amp hours, or AH. So there's 100 amp hours, there's 150 amp hours, there's 120 amp hours, there's 200 amp hours, there's 300 amp hours, there's 280 amp hours, and so on. Now this amp hours has to do with how long or how much energy it stores, and how long it will discharge that energy. So that's the amp hour. So you hear people say, AH, I want 100 AH, I want 200 AH, I want 280 AH, I want 250 AH. So also, the higher or the bigger the amp hours you are going for, the bigger the size of the battery is also going to come in appearance, like its physical size. So 100 AH is going to be smaller than 200 AH, so 200 AH is going to be bigger than 100 AH. So you also need to know this. This is important because you should also be looking at space when you are designing your system. You get it too. Someone will say I want 100 AH, someone will say I want 200 AH, but you need to understand that 200 AH is bigger than 100 AH because it has more cells than that of the 100 AH. So that is the AH, or the amp hours. That is the amount of energy it's able to store. Aside that, I was talking about cells. Some of these lithium-ion batteries has different amounts of cells built in it. The cells are basically, maybe I'll say batteries. So there are a series of batteries in it that does the storage of the energy and then discharges it. So there are lithium battery that has about 13 cells, maybe some 12 cells. There are 15 cells, there are 16 cells, and so on. So a 12 cell or a 13 cell stores less power as against a 16 cell lithium battery. So that is also something you need to know. So when you start asking some of these questions, then you are arriving at something that is going to be good to serve you very well, especially looking at how much money you're going to spend on it. So you need to know, or it is good when you know some of these things. Yes, so aside the amp hours, there's also the number of cells it has, aside the BMS also. And there was one thing I didn't talk about with regard to the inverters, so let me just talk about that now. Inverters comes in sizes, the size or the amount of energy, amount of energy it is able to produce. That is with regard to the inverter. So you have like a 5,000 watt inverter, you have 3,000 watt inverter, a 1,000 watt inverter, a 2,000 watt inverter, 10,000 watts, 8,000, 6,000 watts, and so on. So let me just make it very simple so you understand. Just as I made mention or started from the beginning that this energy is measured in watts. So you have a TV in the house, the energy it uses within an hour is measured in watts, and it's usually written behind the TV. You have a fridge, the energy uses within an hour is measured and it's written behind or maybe inside the fridge, and so on. So when you are deciding to have a solar system, instead of saying, I have a 5-bedroom house, what kind of system will I need? Rather, go to the solar professional and say, I have 2,000 watts, 2 ACs, so 2 pieces of that. I have 200 watt fridge. I have a 60 watt TV. I have 12 watt light. These are the number of pieces I have of that. In that case, whoever it is able to tell you that, okay, so if you have a 2,000 watt AC, one of it, you have a 200 watt TV, which you use. You also have a 60 watt 200 watt fridge, a 60 watt TV, and maybe 12 watts, 2 of it, which makes 24. So 2,000 plus 200 plus 60, that is 2,260. And then you also have 24. So 2,284 watts. That is the total watts ideally you consume. So in that case, whoever it is able to tell you that, okay, based on these things that you've given me, then a 3,000 watt inverter size is going to be okay for your system. You get it? Or maybe a 4,000 watt or a 5,000 watt inverter size is going to be okay. Because when you're designing solar systems, you don't have to design exactly to meet whatever consumption needs the house, whatever it is, needs. Because you have to allow in a bit of safety so that in case it goes a little bit higher, it doesn't affect the entire system. The reason is, an example is, maybe if you have a 3,000 watt inverter, and aside your things that I've listed, the air conditioner, the fridge, the fan, or whatever it is, gives up to maybe 2,800. And you have all these things on, and you go ahead to power an ion. Imagine what will happen to the system. This will affect the system. So you need to know what devices you want to use whenever you're deciding to have a solar system designed or installed for you. You need to know or tell whoever it is that these are the things that I want to use. In case you can't do all this, you can invite whoever it is that these are the things I have, these are the things I want to be able to use on the solar system, so that the system is designed accordingly. Else, having a system which is under-designed is going to malfunction or even end up damaging at the end of the day. So those are some of the considerations you should be looking at whenever you're deciding to have a solar system. Rather than saying, I have a 5-bedroom house, rather say, I have a 5-bedroom house with 2 ACs, each 1.5 horsepower, or each consuming maybe 1,500 watts or 2,000 watts. Now, these appliances have different energy consumed, so you don't have to assume. You need to know, either read from the manual, either read from the appliance itself, and so on, so that you know that this is exactly what it uses. That is very important. And once you have all this information, then it is easier for you yourself to even decide that, okay, then I need this size of inverter or this size of system. And just as I explained earlier, the inverter doesn't work in isolation. It works with the PV, the battery, or even the grid. So once you know the appliances you intend to use, then the same way it is also used to design the number of panels you need to be able to power those appliances, because the panels also generate or does generate electricity. And then also, based on the number of appliances you use, you also decide or determine the size of battery you need to have energy stored in it that you can use over a period of time. So in our house, for instance, what happens is that during the daytime, you're able to run the AC all the way from the morning all the way through to sometime 3 p.m. We like to turn it off around that time, because in the night, when maybe starting from like about 7 all the way through to about 3 a.m., we'll have the AC on because of the size of battery we have. We don't have the size like a lot of batteries where we are able to have the AC on 24 hours. So that's how we regulate it. So during the daytime, we rely on the panels or the energy the panels generates to power the AC, and doesn't affect the battery. So the battery stays the way it is until it gets to a point where the power generated by the panels is insufficient, then you have the battery supplementing that to be able to power whatever device we are using. So then, I hope you now understand some of the things you should be looking at when it comes to a solar system. Aside from that, let's look at a little bit about the design of the solar system. So you have the panels. Let's say we want to design a solar system for this house. We've gotten to know all the things we need. We've realized that we need a 5,000 watt inverter. We've also realized that we need maybe 200 amp hours or 200 AH lithium-ion battery, the one with BMS in it. And we also noticed that, or realized that we need about 500 watts panels. We need about 9 pieces of it. How do we decide we need 9 pieces? Just as I said, based on the appliances that we intend to power, that will determine the number of panels, because the panel, so 500 watts, you have 500 watt panel and you have 9 pieces of that. So let me just do the quick calculation. So if you have let me just bring my calculator. You have 500 watts multiplied by 9. That is giving you 4,500 watt hours for the panel, and that is within 1 hour. Ideally, or usually over our part of the world, the sun is at its peak period for about 6 hours during the day. So 4,500 times 6, it means that within 6 hours, this amount of panels is generating 27,000 watt hours of energy. You get it. That is within that 6 hours. That is based on the panels. Now let's just say this 27,000. Let me just not go into the 27,000. Let me just go with the 4,500 that we have. Now the 4,500 watt hours is responsible for charging the battery. Now the battery is 200 AH. One thing I also didn't mention is that these solar system comes in different voltage or volts. Yes, volts is also one of the electrical terms. And we have a 12 volt system, we have a 24 volt system, as well as we have a 48 volt system. So if you are looking at something for a house like this, you are looking between a 24 volt system or a 48 volt system. I would go for a 48 volt system. So if you have a 48 volt system, and to be able to determine the amp hours you have with it, you multiply the 200 AH by the 48, and that is 9,600 amp hours, or amount of energy able to store for the 200 AH battery. Now we need panels which is going to be able to charge this battery, and from our 9 panels, that is the 500 watts times 9, we have 4,500. Now the 4,500 is going to be able to charge is for 1 hour. So if you multiply this by 6, you notice we have 27,000, and we only need 9,600 to charge the battery. So we have excess power generated, and that is what is able to power whatever device is being used in the house during the daytime, so you don't rely on the battery power. I hope you get this brief calculations I'm doing. So let me just go at it again so it's easier to understand. The battery is measured in amp hours. The panels measured in watts. However, a couple of panels coming together, or even just one panel, generates a certain amount of energy at a certain time. So one 500 watt is only generating 500 watt energy at an hour. So if you're looking at the number of hours the sun stays on, that's about usually average of 6 hours. It could be more, it could be less, but let's just stick with 6 hours. So even if it is 500 watts, one panel you have, and you multiply by 6, you have 3,000 watt hours that is generated from the panels for 6 hours continuously. I hope you get it. Now, if you have a battery 200 AH and you have a 48 volt system, you multiply the 200 AH by 48 and you have 9,600 amp hours. That is the amount of energy it is able to store for that period. So then you look at a panel. What size of panels, or how many panels do I need to be able to produce enough energy or electricity to be able to store it in the battery? So we're looking at a total of 9 panels, and they are all 500 watts each. 500 watts each, because with the solar systems you can't have different size of panels used for the system. No, and for the same system it's not proper, else you might have issues with it, because each size of panel has different cycles as to how it works and the rest. So then if it's 500 watts you are going with, then it's going to be 500 watts throughout. That is for the system. That is the best way to go, because aside the wattage of the panel, there's also the voltage as well as the current that it's producing. So usually you multiply the voltage by the current before you get the wattage. You get it. So a 500 watt panel is usually going to have maybe about 40 volts and maybe about 12 or something current. And when you do the calculation, you get around 500 watts. I hope this makes a little bit of sense. Yeah, I know I've been talking a lot of solar terms already, but please forgive me and just try to follow so that it's easier for you to understand what kind of system you need whenever it comes to a point where you need a solar system for your house. So I think I've mentioned that the systems come in voltage. There's a 12 volt system, I'm saying it again. There's a 24 volt system, and then there's a 48 volt system. So back to the design of our solar system. We now have 9 pieces of 500 watts panels, which is giving us 4,500 watt hours for 1 hour. So if you are doing 6, then it's giving us about 37,000 or so. And then we also have 200 Ah battery, which is a 48 volt system, which is also able to store power about 9,600 amp hours of energy. And then also our inverter is a 48 volt system. Yes, it's very necessary. If you have a 48 volt inverter, you should be able to have a 48 volt battery. Now with the battery, there's interesting thing with the batteries. The batteries, you have different battery sizes that can be put together. Sizes in terms of not the amp hours, not the AH, however, the voltage. So you can have different voltage batteries. So you can have like 12 volts, 12 volts, 12 volts, 12 volts. You have about 4 put together in series. So I'll explain a little bit about that to be able to give you your 48 volt system. And if it's a 24 volt system, you have your 12 volt, 12 volt. So 2 of that, and it's giving you a 24 volt system. I hope you get that. And if it is a 12 volt, you just need 1 12 volt and you're good to go. Now, I made mention about something saying in series. Yes, the panels or the batteries can be connected in series, but let me not talk about the inverter. Let me talk about the panel and then also the battery. The panels, the 9 panels that we have, the array of panels that we have, we need to look at how we are going to arrange them, or the arrangement of it. How are we going to do it? Are we connecting everything one to the inverter, or are we connecting them together and then have just 2 cables to the inverter? How are you doing it? So based on the inverter, that will determine how the panels will have to be configured. I made mention that the inverters, the charge controller in it is measured in amps. That's the current that it's able to take at a go is measured in amps. So you have like a 60 amps MPPT charge controller. MPPT is just one of the types of charge controllers. There's also PWM. MPPT is more effective. So most of the inverters comes with MPPT. So you don't need to worry about that. That should already be built into the inverter if you're looking at the hybrid inverter. So you have 60 amps charge controller, MPPT charge controller in the inverter. And then you have your panels. And maybe your panel 1 is like 13 amps. So then if we are going to arrange in series, so a series means that we are combining the voltage of the panel to give us higher voltage. And parallel means that we are combining the current of the panel to give higher current. So if we have 40 volts, and let's say we are doing 3H in series, and we multiply that by 3, that is like about 120 voltage, which is fine. Now if we have about 13 amps and we multiply by 3, that is 39 amps, which is fine. So I hope you get what the calculation is. So it means for this system, we are going to, maybe because we are limited to 60 amps, we are going to be connecting 3 of the panels each in series. So we connect 3 first, 3 in series, another 3 in series, another 3 in series, and then we parallel all the 3. So for this system, it means that we are going to be having 120 volts for the entire system, and then we are going to have 39 amps for the current of the system. I hope. Yes, so you don't have to worry so much about this, but I hope you understand. That is what is going to be the requirement for this system. So we've gotten that. We've gotten our panels, 3 each in series. So series, we connect them together to increase the voltage. So we now have 120 volts, and then we have 39 amps, or yes, for the current. Because the reason why we are getting 39 amps is that the first set of panels, which are in series, another set of panels which in series, and then the third set of panels which in series, are all connected together in parallel. So then that increases the current of the entire solar system, and that is going to be connected to the inverter. But before it is connected to the inverter, because we are designing a system, there's something that are known as SPDs. So SPDs are surge protecting devices. What this does is that in case there's any issue at any point within the system, maybe currents going more than it should be and the rest, that is if the design of the system is done properly, it will trip and then it will go off to be able to secure the system. Now these SPDs are used in the design also to be able to isolate different parts of the system. So you can isolate the panels, so you can do maintenance, carry maintenance on them. You can isolate the battery, so you can carry out maintenance on that. You can isolate the grid, so you can also maybe do something with the inverter and the rest. So if you're having a system designed for you, you should be asking about SPDs. Now these SPDs comes in amps, that's the current. So you should have the correct size of SPDs used, that is the breakers that we normally say for the system. Aside the SPD, there's also a specific type of SPD which also works with, like, in case there's lightning that strikes the panels. That is if you don't have lightning arrestor and it strikes the panel, whatever electricity is producing, it's done in such a way that it goes into the earth. So there's earth cable connected to it, that, and once there's lightning, it strikes the system, then it channels that to the earth. So that is also a specific type of SPD that is available aside the usual breakers that we know. And the lightning protection device, that's the LPD, which you might have seen where we have the lightning arrestor on top of the house. So that is done in place where in case it rains, there's lightning and the rest, it's able to absorb or attract that lightning and channels that into the earth so that it doesn't affect your system. So designing the system, you need to have some of these things in place to be able to secure the system. So for our system, we will have about 60 amps or even 50 amps because we are generating only 39 amps. So we have about 50 amps breaker for the panels. And then we'll come to the battery. Now, because of the size of the battery, 200 Ah, usually the current will be like about 100 amps or 80 amps or 120 amps. So for that also we'll have like about 200 and maybe 200 or 250 amps breaker size for the battery. And that is also help us to isolate the system if we have to. And then for the grid, maybe we'll have like about 80 amps or maybe 100 amps for the grid. So we have breakers for the panels, we have breakers for the batteries, we also have breakers for the grid, so that we are able to isolate the system. Also, in case there's any issues, it's able to trip and then it secures the system. So when a solar system is being designed for you, you should be looking out for these things. And then sometimes you will need maybe a changeover, just if you would want to manually be doing a changeover, or if you would want to have that automatically. The automatic changeovers also available. So we have our panels, we have our breakers, we have our battery, we have our inverter. Then you also have to look at the size of the cables. This is really important. A lot of time people don't take this into consideration, and it brings about a lot of issues. There are solar systems that do catch fire. Yes, solar can be dangerous. Yes, there are solar systems that explode. Yes, if the right things are not done. So aside the breakers, looking at the sizes of the breakers, you should also be looking at the size of the cables you are using. Now for solar systems, it is recommended that you use DC cables because the entire system, especially for the panel, is generating DC, that's direct current. The battery is also generating DC direct current. For the grid, you have to use AC cable for that. So we are using DC cables for the panels, another DC cable for the battery, and an AC cable for the grid. Now for our house, based on the panel size that we are using, that is 550 watts, we are connecting them in series and parallel. We are going to be using 6mm square or 6mm square cable for that. Now, I'm saying 6mm cable because 6mm is able to hold up to about 60 or 80 amps of current. Yes, that is, yeah. So you need to know all this. And usually, with inverters in the manual, all these things are stated. That is why it is good to read about the system before you have it implemented. So whoever is implementing it needs to know all this. So the right size of cables will have to be used for the panels, and then for the battery, because we are using 200H, usually we need about, let's say, about 24 millimeters or about 35 millimeters size for the battery as well. So we'll use, let's say, about 35 millimeters size for the battery. I hope you get it. So now we've designed our panels. We know the right size of cable we are using. We know the right sizes of breakers we are using, the right sizes of cable for the battery as well. Then we also look at the AC. Maybe the AC, we can look at 16 millimeter square cable for the AC. Now that is also based on the size of system you are designing. One thing you also need to know is that for those who are already connected to the grid, there's something known as single phase, two phase, or three, and then also three phase, and so on. Now this has to do with the amount of power that is being sent or being brought to your house from the electricity company. And usually for three phase, you have three positive cables or three positive wires or live wires, and then you have one neutral or negative wire. For two phase, you have two positive cables, and then you have one negative cable. For one phase, you only have one positive cable and then one negative cable. The same as you have for the grid, you also have inverters that are three phase as well as single phase and even two phase. I hope you get it. So you need to know all these things, especially whoever is designing the system, to be able to use the appropriate size of inverter, whether it's three phase, single phase, and the rest. Some inverters, let's say single phase, allows you to split them into three phase, like the power output, so that it's able to serve your house. Now the reason why you may have a three phase is that a 10-bedroom house, the amount of energy it needs to power the devices, let's say ACs in every room, is more than that of like a 2-bedroom house, which will have just two ACs. And one live wire is carrying certain amount of current that is not able to power everything. Else you might experience low current. That's why ideally you have three phase or three live wires coming, each producing different amount of current, and that is able to power whatever devices you have in the house. Now let's talk about cost, so you understand some of these things. Now cost wise, if you are looking at about a 3000 watt inverter, a hybrid inverter, there are different brands available. The price range will usually start between 4,000 to about 5,000 or maybe 6,000, depending on the brand. About 5,000 watts will be maybe from about 6,000 to about 8,000 or 9,000, depending on the brand. And then about 10,000 watts or 10 kVA will also be between about 16, maybe some about 15, 14,000 to about 25,000, also depending on the brand. Also depending whether it's a single phase or three phase. Also for the panels, for about 400 watt panel should be about 1,300, 1,400 to about maybe 1,800. For 60 or 450 should be about 1,400, 1,500 to about 2,000 cities, and then maybe 500 to 550 watts should be between about 1,800 to about 2,500, also depending on the brand. And then you have the battery. So lithium battery with about 16 cells in it will have, that is 100 Ah, will sell between about 16,000 to about 20 something thousand, and maybe 32 cells will sell for about that is 200 Ah, will sell like about 38,000, from 35,000 to about 40 something thousand cities. So this is just rough cost wise idea as of now. So in case you are watching this video in the near future, this cost may not really apply to you, but for the time being, this is some of the costs you should be looking at for the type of system you're designing, you're having, as well as the brands that you're looking at having as well. Another consideration for solar system is that you need to have the system installed in a well-ventilated area. The reason is because the inverter especially generates some heat depending on the brand or the type or even the size, and how it's being used will determine the amount of heat it is generating. So having a well-ventilated area is going to be good for the system. So you need to have like a spacious place, and then not crowd or have the system crowded over there, but have a spacious place where the system is going to be installed. Another thing also about solar is that you can start small and upgrade with time. So you can start with some few panels and some few batteries, and then with time you can upgrade the panels and then the batteries. So in summary, these are some of the things that goes into solar systems design. Oh, let me talk a little bit about the panels as well. Aside the cost, now there are different type of roofs that we have available. You have the gable type, you have skillion roof, you have concrete roof, you have so many types of roof. Now, in case you are going to have panels installed on your roof, and it's maybe roofing sheet or maybe even the slate and the rest, first or maybe some time back, they would have had to drill the roof to install the roof mount or clamps to have the rails and the rest. But now there are clamps that doesn't require you to drill the roof, and I personally am against drilling of roof. So try as much as possible to have clamps that do not require drilling of the roof to be installed, so that you don't experience any form of leakage with your roof. The reason I'm saying this is because people rent people's homes and still want to have a solar system. You can't rent somebody's home and have their roof drilled. So you should be looking at some of these things when you're having a solar system installed for you. So in summary, these are some of the things that goes into a solar system: having a PV, the photovoltaic or the solar panels, the inverter, the battery, knowing the different types of currents, alternate currents, direct current, being able to calculate the total consumption of your house in watts, knowing what each appliance consumes and for how long you have them on. Also knowing that the panels can be connected in series or in parallel, the same as the battery in series or in parallel, and also the inverter can also be paralleled to be able to. So if you have like your need is about 10 kVA, you can have 5,000 watt or 5 kVA to be able to produce that 10 kVA for you. So I think I've tried my best to be able to do justice to some of these things or terms that comes with solar system, and maybe there are some few things I might have missed out or forgot, but through your questions that you may ask in the comment section will help me to be able to structure a different video to be able to throw more insight or light to some of these things. So whenever you're having a solar system designed for you, try to ask a lot of questions to be sure that the right size of system is being done for you and the right set of materials are being used, so that you don't end up having your system catching fire. Yes, because solar systems can catch fire, they can also explode when the right things are not done. The right size of breakers are not used, as well as the right size of cables are not used. So this video looks like it's been a lengthy one. It's about close to an hour video. So I would like to bring it to an end. At this point, I think I've been able to tackle what I had here. The solar system, the inverter, the battery, considerations for solar, cost ideas, and then what could go wrong, which I've spoken about, and then some safety things or safety you can implement with your solar system. So that'll be just about it for this video. Thank you very much for sticking around all the way from the beginning to this point. I hope you've gathered some valuable information from this video and you're able to use that with your solar system. So I'll see you in the next one.